Welcome back, fellow seekers of the shadows. You've tuned into Stories of Crime, the place where the veil between the mundane and the monstrous is brutally ripped away. Tonight, we aren't just reading a report. We are opening a file, marked top priority, tucked away in the darkest corner of the archives. We're going to step across that chalk line and peer into the void, where human nature meets its most terrifying extremes. In this hour, the street lights flicker, the shadows deepen, and the truth is often far more chilling than any fiction you could invent. Forget the heroes. Tonight, we focus on the villains. On the motives that curdle the blood, and the consequences that echo forever. So, dim the lights. Lock your doors. Take a deep, steadying breath, because once the story begins, there's no turning back. This is Stories of Crime. And the case we're unfolding tonight is The Sign of the Four. Look, the mystery of the pearls. Sound of a single, heavy pearl, clicking softly onto a polished wooden surface, followed by a sustained, low hum of anticipation and a faint, distant foghorn welcome, dear listener, to a journey into the heart of London's most intriguing mysteries, a world where logic clashes with the unknown, and shadows conceal secrets that yearn to be brought into the light. Tonight, we open the very first chapter of Arthur Conan Doyle's The Sign of the Four, a tale that begins not with a bang, but with a whisper, a shimmer, and an escalating sense of dread. Imagine, if you will, the scene: a solitary, lustrous pearl, a tiny orb of captured moonlight, rolls to a gentle stop on the rich, dark grain of a polished wooden table. Its surface reflects not just the dim gaslight, but also the heavy, expectant silence of a room where a young woman holds her breath. Sound of a creaking floorboard, a woman's slight sigh. This is the very essence of our beginning, a moment suspended between beauty and profound unease. Each year, for 6 long years, such a pearl has arrived. An anonymous, inexplicable gift, delivered without note, without explanation, carrying with it an increasingly heavy mantle of mystery. These aren't just jewels, they are markers of time, enigmatic signals from an unknown benefactor, each successive arrival deepening the enigma rather than clarifying it. The beauty of these pearls, exquisite in their own right, is overshadowed by the sheer absence of context, the chilling blankness of their origin. And this year, something has irrevocably changed. The air in the modest dwelling of Miss Mary Morstan, our central figure in this unfolding drama, is thick with an apprehension that goes beyond mere curiosity. For 6 years, she has grappled with the peculiar ritual, the arrival of these precious, silent messengers. Each year, the same question lingers, unanswered, growing more persistent with every passing season. Why? Why her? Who is behind this strange, generous, yet unsettling tribute? The human mind, by its very nature, craves resolution, abhors ambiguity, and yet Mary has lived with this beautiful, persistent ambiguity for so long. It is a unique psychological burden, to be gifted something so valuable, yet to be utterly robbed of the simple satisfaction of understanding its source or its purpose. Consider for a moment the psychological impact of such a prolonged, unexplained kindness. At first, there might be wonder, even a touch of delight. But as the pattern repeats, year after year, without a single clue, that wonder morphs into something far more complex, a gnawing curiosity, a persistent anxiety, perhaps even a subtle fear. What obligation might such a series of gifts imply? What hidden agenda might be at play? The very act of giving, when stripped of communication, transforms from an act of generosity into an act of power, a silent assertion of presence and influence from afar. Sound of rustling paper, a sharp intake of breath, and then, this year, the silence was broken. Not by a voice, but by a letter. A stark, chilling message that shattered the delicate, almost ceremonial peace of the annual pearl delivery. Mary Morstan holds it now, her fingers trembling slightly, her eyes scanning the hastily scribbled lines. The words, though few, carry the weight of a storm front, promising upheaval. Be at the third pillar from the left outside the Lyceum Theatre tonight at 7 o'clock, she reads aloud, her voice barely a whisper, a tremor running through the simple sentence. If you are afraid, bring 2 friends. You are a wronged woman, and justice waits you. Do not bring the police. The immediacy of the threat, the explicit warning against involving the authorities, the declaration of wronged woman, these phrases are designed to cut through any lingering complacency, to demand attention, to instill both fear and a compelling, undeniable urge to know more. This is no longer a polite, if eccentric, annual gift. This is an summons, a challenge, a promise of revelations, perhaps even retribution. It's a masterful hook, is. Intro plus POV, the doctor's perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed listeners, welcome to what I hope will be a truly immersive journey. not merely a reading, but a deeper exploration into the human mind, the intricate tapestry of Victorian London, and the extraordinary individuals who walked its gaslit streets. This is an audiobook experience designed to transport you, to invite you into the very thoughts and observations of the characters themselves, beginning, as is only fitting, with my own. My name is Dr. John H. Watson, and as I speak, I find myself, as I often have, gazing across the familiar, yet perpetually disheveled, sitting room at 221B Baker Street. Before me, sprawled in his armchair, a spectacle of profound indolence, sits the unique figure of Mr. Sherlock Holmes. The morning sun, usually a herald of bustling activity and the promise of new mysteries, merely illuminates the dust motes dancing in the air, a lazy, indifferent ballet around the silent, brooding figure. He is not reading, not experimenting with his foul-smelling chemicals, nor even plucking at his violin with that melancholic, almost mournful, passion that so often accompanies his deepest cogitations. No, today, he is simply existing. His long, thin fingers are laced together, his gaze distant, fixed upon some unseen point in the ceiling, a silent theater where only he perceives the drama unfolding. Or perhaps, more accurately, where no drama at all unfolds, and that, in itself, is the profound problem. For Sherlock Holmes, the absence of a stimulating intellectual challenge is a void, a terrible, gnawing vacuum that, if left unchecked, can lead to the most desperate and alarming of remedies. It is a sight I have become accustomed to, though never entirely at peace with. This sudden, inexplicable descent into what I can only describe as a profound lethargy, a mental hibernation from which he only emerges when the scent of a fresh enigma wafts into our shared quarters. And today, the air hangs heavy, devoid of such invigorating aromas. The pervasive scent of his tobacco, a strong, acrid Persian blend, mingles with the faint, metallic tang of some chemical residue from his last experiment, and beneath it all, the comforting, yet slightly stale, aroma of old books and newspapers. The room itself, a chaotic testament to his active mind and utter disregard for conventional order, reflects his current state, a collection of dormant clues, silent witnesses to past triumphs, awaiting a spark to bring them back to life. Microscopes jostle with tobacco pouches, unread letters lie beneath overturned test tubes, and the floor is a scattered mosaic of crime reports and scientific journals. It is a microcosm of his mind, brilliant, cluttered, and only truly alive when engaged in pursuit of the truth. One might wonder, watching such a man, what truly drives such an intellect? Is it merely a passion for solving puzzles, or something deeper, more elemental? I've often pondered this, even debated it in my own mind, sometimes silently, sometimes in frustrated, murmured tones directed at his unhearing form. To possess such a gift, a mind capable of seeing patterns and connections invisible to the vast majority of humanity, must be both a blessing and a curse. When that gift is not engaged, when the engine of logic is idled, the internal pressure must become immense. Have you ever felt that, dear listener? That insistent need to do something, to solve something, to apply your unique talents, lest they atrophy. Perhaps you, too, have known the exquisite torture of a mind restless for purpose. For Holmes, the alternative to intellectual engagement is a precarious one. It is a path that leads him, occasionally, to the use of cocaine, a dark indulgence he rationalizes as a necessary stimulant for his extraordinary faculties, a temporary surrogate for the mental exhilaration of a challenging case. And it is this very vulnerability, this human frailty in a man otherwise seemingly beyond the common failings of mankind, that has always fascinated and disturbed me in equal measure. He is not merely a thin. Chapter 1, The Science of Deduction. Sound of an old grandfather clock ticking steadily, subtle but present. Fade in gentle, melancholic violin music, a short, complex piece that conveys both intellect and a hint of sadness, then fade out slightly beneath narration. Welcome, dear listeners, to Chapter 1 of The Sign of the Four, a journey that plunges us deeper into the labyrinthine mind of the incomparable Sherlock Holmes. Our tale opens, as so many do, in the familiar, somewhat cluttered sanctuary of 221B Baker Street. It is here, amidst the scientific instruments, the chemical stains, and the ever-present tobacco, that we find Dr. John Watson, observing his enigmatic companion with a mixture of awe, concern, and a profound sense of camaraderie. The air, though familiar, is thick with an unspoken tension, a prelude to the extraordinary events that are about to unfold. Sound of a small file clinking gently, then a soft, almost imperceptible hiss. We find Holmes, at this moment, engaged in a ritual that has become increasingly troubling to his faithful chronicler. 3 times a day, with a precision as meticulous as his deductions, Holmes turns to the needle and the 7% solution of cocaine. It is a stark, almost brutal testament to the duality of the man, the brilliant mind capable of logic so profound it borders on prescience, and the troubled soul perpetually seeking escape from the crushing weight of boredom. Watson voice, slightly concerned, a hint of weariness. My dear Holmes, surely you must see the folly of this habit. Your marvelous brain, that instrument of unparalleled precision, it demands better sustenance than this artificial stimulant. Holmes calm, almost detached. My dear Watson, you are a medical man, and therefore, you look at these things from a purely material point of view. But I assure you, it is not merely the body that requires nourishment, it is the mind. My mind rebels at stagnation. Give me problems, give me work, give me the most abstruse cryptogram or the most intricate analysis, and I am in my proper atmosphere. I can then dispense with artificial stimulants. But I abhor the dull routine of existence. I crave mental exaltation. Here we confront the central paradox of Sherlock Holmes. His genius is both his greatest gift and his heaviest burden. Without intellectual stimulation, the world becomes a gray, featureless expanse, and his extraordinary faculties turn inward, consuming him. Watson, ever the pragmatic observer, recognizes the danger, the self-destructive impulse lurking beneath the surface of his friend's unparalleled intellect. This isn't merely a vice, it is a desperate measure taken by a man whose mind operates on a different frequency than the rest of humanity. It's a compelling, if uncomfortable, truth. The extraordinary can often come at an extraordinary cost. Watson voice, more emphatic, but Holmes, consider the consequence. Your system will suffer, your remarkable powers dulled rather than sharpened in the long run. There are other modes of stimulation. The fresh air, the countryside. Holmes a dismissive wave of the hand. Fiddlesticks, Watson. My life is one long effort to escape from the commonplace. These little doses of anodyne merely serve to quicken my already active imagination when it threatens to flag. What object is there in this world, I ask you, for an extraordinary man if he has no field for his talents? This great city, London, teeming with crime, with mysteries begging to be solved, yet so many days pass in utter tranquility. It is maddening. This dialogue lays bare the core conflict of Holmes's existence, the insatiable hunger of his mind for challenge. For him, the absence of a puzzle isn't peace, it's a void. It's a fundamental aspect of his psychology, a drive that compels him towards the darkest corners of human nature, not out of morbid curiosity, but out of an unyielding need to engage his unparalleled faculties. We, as listeners, might find ourselves questioning, what drives our minds? Do we, too, seek stimulation, perhaps through less drastic means, to stave off the feeling? Chapter 2, The Statement of the Case. Welcome, dear listeners, to the second chapter, mysterious and captivating, of the classic novel The Sign of the Four, a chapter entitled The Statement of the Case. Together, we will venture into a strange tale in which the appearance of a mysterious visitor ignites one of the most complex cases ever faced by Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. The story begins in the familiar apartment on Baker Street, where Dr. Watson often observes Holmes with a mixture of admiration for his extraordinary talents and concern over his eccentric habits. Watson frequently wonders whether it is precisely the stark contrast between Holmes's ruthlessly sharp powers of deduction and his periods of drug-induced withdrawal that has created such a singular figure. It is a curious combination, an exceptional mind nourished by cold logic, yet one that occasionally seeks artificial stimulation to escape the boredom of everyday life, a life in which ordinary cases can never satisfy his intellectual hunger. Holmes, with his keen eyes and ceaselessly working brain, is forever searching for intricate fragments to assemble, for challenging puzzles to solve. Watson, by his side, serves as an emotional counterbalance, a humane narrator who allows us, the listeners, to sense the depth and humanity of the story, elements Holmes sometimes overlooks in his absolute focus on dry facts. The usual stillness of the room is suddenly broken by the sound of the doorbell. This is no ordinary visitor. Holmes, guided by his sharp intuition, senses this immediately. The door opens, and a young woman steps inside. At the very sight of her, Watson is instantly drawn to her appearance and bearing. She is Mary Morstan, slender and tall, with a delicate face, pale skin, and softly shining light blonde hair. Her clear blue eyes reflect intelligence and an indescribable sadness. Her appearance conveys the refinement and decorum of a well-bred lady, yet beneath her gaze and gestures lies tension, an anxiety she cannot fully conceal. She does not complain or weep. Instead, there is a deep sorrow, delicately restrained. This is a hallmark of Victorian womanhood, emotional restraint, the ability to maintain composure and dignity even in the face of adversity. Mary Morstan is not only beautiful but also radiates courage and admirable resilience. Watson, a sensitive man, immediately feels a strong sense of empathy, a powerful urge to protect and help her. Holmes, by contrast, approaches the situation with absolute coldness and objectivity, regarding Mary Morstan as a collection of data to be analyzed rather than as an individual in need of comfort. Mary Morstan takes a seat and, in a calm yet clear voice, begins to recount her strange story, a story that has stretched on for many years in uncertainty and anxiety. Her father, Captain Arthur Morstan, had served in a British regiment in India during the period of British imperial rule, a time both turbulent and dazzling. British officers like Captain Morstan often lived lives of luxury shadowed by danger, thousands of miles from home. Mary was sent to boarding school in Edinburgh, a common decision among British officers in India to ensure their children received a proper English education, far from the harsh climate and potential dangers of the colonies. When she was 17, in 1878, her father finally returned to England after many years apart. They arranged to meet at Charing Cross Hotel, a well-known and bustling location in the heart of London. It was an ideal meeting place for reunions crowded with travelers coming and going, horse-drawn carriages clattering past, and the characteristic din of a great city at the height of the Victorian era. Late 19th century London was a global centre, a labyrinth of cobbled streets, red brick buildings, and secrets hidden beneath thick layers of fog. Imagine the scene: a cold winter afternoon, gas lamps beginning to glow, and a young woman full of hope waiting for her beloved father after years of separation, excitement and anticipation mixed with a quiet anxiety over a reunion long delayed. But Captain Morstan never appeared. He did not arrive at the appointed place. With a heavy heart, Mary went to the hotel to search for him, only to be told that her father had left the previous night and had not returned. This plunged the young woman into utter panic. At that time, communication was extremely limited: no mobile phones, no email. When someone disappeared, they vanished completely, leaving behind only emptiness and countless unanswered questions. Mary Morstan searched desperately, even consulting her father's only friend in London, Major Sholto. Yet the reply she received only deepened the mystery. Major Sholto denied knowing that Captain Morstan had returned to London and appeared genuinely surprised and confused by the news. Only a few days later, Major Sholto suddenly died of heart disease. This strange coincidence cannot help but raise questions. Did Major Sholto truly know nothing, or was he concealing a dark secret? Was his death at such a crucial moment merely accidental, or was it a piece of a larger scheme? In the world of Sherlock Holmes, nothing is accidental. Every coincidence is a clue, a thread leading toward a hidden truth. This is a vital lesson in reasoning. Always question what seems obvious, especially suspicious coincidences. Look beneath the surface, to the motives and concealed events beneath. Major Sholto's death may be a classic example of a convenient death, one that removes a potential witness or someone capable of revealing critical information. Could this be a cover for an even greater secret? After Major Sholto's death, all traces of Captain Morstan vanished completely. No clues, no sign of life. He seemed to dissolve into thin air, leaving Mary Morstan alone with overwhelming grief and confusion. The psychological burden on a young woman in such circumstances is immense. Living in uncertainty, not knowing whether a loved one is alive or dead, without closure to accept and move on. Then, 6 years later, another strange event occurred. In 1884, Mary Morstan began receiving large pearls by mail, anonymously one each year. This inexplicable occurrence was both beautiful and haunting. Pearls symbolize purity, beauty, and wealth, and in the Victorian era they were exceedingly valuable, usually reserved for the upper classes. Receiving such precious pearls annually, without knowing the sender's identity, added yet another layer of mystery to her father's disappearance. Were they an act of atonement, a form of compensation, or a coded message from someone who knew Captain Morstan's fate? Perhaps they were a reminder that her father's case remained unresolved, that someone out there held the key to the truth. This became a psychological riddle, a test of Mary's patience and hope. Should she accept these gifts? What did they mean? How were they connected to her father's disappearance? The climax of these strange events came with a letter Mary received that very day, the letter that brought her to Sherlock Holmes's door. It provided crucial information and made a special request. The sender proposed a meeting at the Lyceum Theatre at 7 o'clock that evening, promising to deliver justice to her. Notably, the letter warned her to bring along 2 friends. This warning immediately captured Holmes's attention. Justice is a powerful word, implying that the sender knows the truth about Captain Morstan's disappearance and may be involved. The request to bring two companions suggests possible danger or complexity. Did the sender fear for Mary's safety, or seek witnesses to ensure fairness, or perhaps protection against false accusations? All of these possibilities are ones a detective like Holmes must consider. The Lyceum Theatre, one of London's largest and most famous theatres at the time, was itself a symbolic choice. A grand cultural center, it was both public and potentially perilous. Crowds allow one to blend in and vanish, yet also make discreet surveillance possible. Imagine an old map of London appearing on screen, finely inked, with a blinking point marking the Lyceum Theatre, the precise spot where Mary Morstan's fate is about to turn in an entirely new direction. When Mary finishes her story, Holmes, as ever, shows no emotion. He focuses solely on gathering facts, arranging them logically in his mind, asking incisive questions about times, places, exact words, and concealed feelings. To Holmes, Mary Morstan is not a pitiable woman in need of comfort but a valuable source of information, a fragment of a larger puzzle. This is the hallmark of his method, stripping away emotion to focus entirely on logic and objective truth. In stark contrast, Dr. Watson, with his warm heart and sensitivity, is captivated by Mary Morstan from the very first glance. He empathizes deeply with her suffering and recognizes her beauty, intelligence, and courage. For Watson, this is not merely another case but a chance to help someone in distress, someone with whom he feels an immediate connection. This contrast between Holmes and Watson lies at the heart of their enduring appeal. Holmes as pure intellect and logic, Watson as heart and humanity, the emotional bridge between the story and the reader, or listener. Together, this balance enables them to solve even the most complex cases. Without hesitation, Holmes and Watson agree to accompany Mary Morstan to the fateful meeting at the Lyceum Theatre. This is not just a detective assignment, but an adventure into a mysterious world where threads of the past, secrets of a vast empire, and human ambition intertwine. As they prepare, the atmosphere in the room grows tense. Each carries distinct thoughts and emotions, yet all share a single aim: to uncover the truth. Holmes organizes facts in his mind. Watson feels anxious yet compassionate, and Mary Morstan balances hope with fear about what lies ahead. In this chapter, we witness the beginning of a dramatic journey marked by the mysterious disappearance of Captain Morstan, the strange pearls, and a letter promising justice. It shows how an apparently simple event can open a doorway to a complex world of crime and secrets. We clearly see the differing approaches of Holmes and Watson, one guided by cold reason, the other by deep empathy. As we close this chapter, we are invited not merely to absorb information but to reflect: are the pearls a form of atonement, or do they carry a darker message? Who sent the letter, and what is their true purpose in asking Mary to bring two friends? And why was the Lyceum Theatre chosen as the meeting place? These questions lead us into the next chapter, where the first pieces of the larger picture will begin to emerge. Remember the key words of this chapter: disappearance, pearls, justice, and Lyceum. These are the threads guiding us into the labyrinth of mystery. Prepare yourselves, the real adventure has only just begun. Chapter 3: In Quest of a Solution. Sound of a hansom cab pulling away, horse hooves clattering softly on cobblestones, distant rumble of London, a faint, mournful foghorn. Welcome back, dear listener, to a new chapter in our unfolding mystery, The Sign of the Four. We now embark upon Chapter 3, In Quest of a Solution, a journey that will plunge us deeper into the labyrinthine heart of Victorian London, a city both magnificent and menacing, cloaked in the perpetual enigma of its own vastness. The air in Baker Street had crackled with a peculiar tension following Miss Morstan's revelation. For Sherlock Holmes, it was the breath of life, a new intellectual challenge to sharpen his already formidable mind. For Miss Morstan, however, it was a terrifying plunge into the unknown, a journey fraught with anxieties only partially veiled by her composed exterior. And for Dr. Watson, it was a familiar blend of scientific curiosity and human concern, particularly for the distressed young lady. Holmes, with a characteristic gleam in his eyes, had swiftly given instructions for a hansom cab. There was an urgency to his movements, a restless energy that betrayed his excitement, a stark contrast to the quiet apprehension settling upon Miss Morstan. As we bundled ourselves into the waiting cab, the chill of the November evening seemed to seep into our very bones, promising a truly atmospheric, if somewhat unsettling, excursion. The cab rattled off, its wheels grinding over the wet cobblestones, pulling us away from the familiar gaslight glow of Baker Street and into the deepening maw of London's sprawling arteries. The fog, a ubiquitous companion to the city in autumn, was already thickening. It clung to the towering buildings, blurring their sharp edges into ghostly silhouettes, and diffused the orange glow of the gas lamps into an ethereal haze, creating long, dancing shadows that stretched and shrank with every turn. The air, heavy and damp, carried with it the unique symphony of the city, the rhythmic clip-clop of horse hooves, some near, some far, the distant, plaintive wail of a foghorn from the Thames, a mournful lament across the unseen waters, the muffled roar of countless unseen carriages and drays, and the ceaseless, murmuring undertone of hundreds of thousands of human voices, a collective hum of lives lived out in the vast, intricate tapestry of this colossal metropolis. We were, in essence, entering a different London, moving beyond the genteel, predictable lanes and into the more shadowy, less trodden paths that wound through its ancient core. Every turn brought a new vista, or rather, a new impression, as the fog masked detail, lending an almost spectral quality to the everyday. Gas lamps, strung like solitary jewels, struggled valiantly against the encroaching gloom, casting short, weak circles of light that merely served to emphasize the impenetrable darkness beyond. They illuminated fleeting glimpses of brickwork, the occasional passing figure, or the skeletal branches of a plane tree, dripping with moisture. My gaze often drifted to Miss Morstan, huddled quietly beside me. Her gloved hands were clasped tightly in her lap, and though her chin was held high, the subtle tremor in her lips and the slight furrow in her brow betrayed the internal struggle. She was a woman of courage, undoubtedly, but this journey was a leap of faith into a chasm of uncertainty, a journey to meet an unknown individual at an unknown address, all predicated upon an anonymous note. How many of us, I wondered, would possess such fortitude in the face of such profound ambiguity? Her anxiety was palpable, a quiet counterpoint to the insistent rumble of the cab and the city's ceaseless thrum. It was a human anxiety, relatable and understandable, a natural response to being drawn into a situation so deeply unsettling, so far removed from the ordinary routines of life. Holmes, conversely, was a study in controlled exhilaration. His keen eyes, usually so piercing, now seemed almost alight, darting from side to side, absorbing every detail that the fog-shrouded streets reluctantly off. Chapter 4: The Story of the Bald-Headed Man. Welcome, dear listeners, to Chapter 4 of the gripping book The Sign of the Four, entitled The Story of the Bald-Headed Man. After the shocking revelations of a mysterious death and an enigmatic invitation, we now follow Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, and Miss Morstan on their journey to Pondicherry Lodge, where long-buried secrets about the Agra treasure will gradually come to light. Prepare yourselves to sink into a chapter filled with chilling details, horrifying disclosures, and an encounter with a character no less peculiar. Our trip to Pondicherry Lodge was a strange journey through the familiar streets of London, yet with the sensation that we were moving into a completely different world, cut off from the noisy reality around us. When our cab turned into a winding, little-used road, the atmosphere seemed to change, growing heavier and quieter. We passed dense, overgrown shrubs and old walls coated with moss and the marks of time, as though they themselves were whispering ancient, forgotten stories. Pondicherry Lodge was not the grand mansion I had imagined, but a rather modest house, hidden behind a tangled garden where wild growth had nearly swallowed the path. Beds of weeds sprawled in disorder, climbing vines twisted everywhere, forming a gloomy scene that looked long abandoned, though a faint light from within suggested life remained. A cold, eerie feeling crept into the air, as if the house were holding secrets too heavy to be exposed in daylight. Perhaps it was this decay, the contrast between the crumbling exterior and the wealth we expected to find, that created the first haunting impression of the story about to unfold. As the rusty iron gate creaked open, we were received by an Indian manservant, a quick, dark-skinned fellow with a smile I can only describe as both forced and faintly sinister. It offered no comfort or welcome, instead it stirred unease, as if something were not quite genuine, as if a carefully hidden deception lay behind the polite surface. Everything about him, from his traditional clothing to the submissive bow of his head, carried an air of mystery, making me wonder whether he was the guardian of the house's secrets. He led us inside, and every step we took on the old wooden floorboards seemed to echo through the stillness. The interior of Pondicherry Lodge was a baffling, almost shocking mixture of Eastern splendor and European clutter, two utterly different worlds colliding and blending at random. In one corner there might be a finely hand-woven Persian carpet, vivid with intricate patterns and rich colors, lying beneath a weathered English oak table piled with stacks of old books and unopened letters. Delicately carved ivory figurines, Hindu gods and heroes, stood beside Victorian mahogany cabinets whose shelves held chipped porcelain teacups. On the walls, silk hangings embroidered with roaring tigers and blazing phoenixes clashed with dark, dusty landscape paintings of the English countryside. There was no harmony, no deliberate arrangement, only an accumulation of objects, each telling its own story yet strangely out of place in the shared space. The air felt heavy, carrying the scent of burned-out incense, old wood, and an indefinable odor, perhaps the smell of long-settled dust and sealed secrets. The scene immediately suggested an unusual way of life, a blend of past glory and present neglect, a clear sign of an owner with a complicated soul, someone torn between two cultures, between wealth and a nameless fear. We were shown into a warm room where a small fire crackled in the grate, trying to drive away the cold and gloom of the house. There, at last, we met Thaddeus Sholto. Thaddeus was a small, thin man with a perfectly bald head, gleaming and catching the firelight. His face was wrinkled and constantly twitching, his bright eyes, full of anxiety, darted back and forth as though searching for an invisible threat. His appearance at once suggested a man living in extreme tension, as if any moment might bring some unforeseen catastrophe. From the very beginning it was clear that Thaddeus was a hypochondriac, obsessively anxious about his health. He continually complained of vague aches and pains, of his sensitivity to drafts, and of the need to keep the room at an exact temperature. A small ebony medicine cabinet stood beside his chair, crammed with bottles, syringes, and vials of strangely colored liquids, like an arsenal against countless imagined illnesses. He kept sipping some tonic, now and then lifting a hand to check his pulse, or sighing gloomily about the fragility of his constitution. His fixation on health was more than a mere habit. It seemed like a shield, a way of diverting his fear from something larger, some deeper psychological burden he could not name. Perhaps fear of physical illness was only the outward expression of a more profound dread, of something threatening his safety, a worry that had gnawed at him for years. The trembling of his hands, his evasive gaze, his thin, hesitant voice all combined to form a portrait of a man imprisoned by fear, not only fear of his own death, but fear of secrets that had haunted his family for a long time. Thaddeus Sholto was not merely a sickly man, he was also complex, an odd mixture of artistic sensitivity and spiritual weakness. He was passionate about orchids, delicate and intricate flowers that demand meticulous care and a perfect environment. In his room, amid the clutter and gloom, rare orchids bloomed in vivid colors and unusual forms, an unexpected splash of beauty. He spoke of them with intense devotion, as though they were living creatures to whom he could confide his deepest secrets. This contrast between his obsession with frail health and his love for the fragile beauty of orchids revealed another facet of his character, a soul seeking refinement and beauty in a world he perceived as harsh and dangerous. Thaddeus's manner of speaking, though shaky and often interrupted by sighs or health complaints, had an almost theatrical quality. He enjoyed telling a story dramatically, stressing each word, creating suspense as if performing for an unseen audience. Every sentence felt carefully shaped, every gesture seemed deliberate. He appeared to take pleasure in prolonging our anticipation before revealing the most important information. This was not merely a quirk, it was part of his coping mechanism, a way to control the situation and command attention, perhaps to disguise the depth of his fear. His ornate manner, combined with his fragile build and shining bald head, created an unforgettable image of the bald-headed man in our minds. As soon as the conversation began, the tension in the air noticeably increased. Thaddeus looked at Miss Morstan with an expression of pity and guilt, the look I have seen in people burdened with an enormous weight of conscience. He began with a weak denial, trying to avoid the truth, but at last the horrifying fact emerged. His brother, Bartholomew, was dead. Not merely dead, but murdered, brutally and mysteriously, inside a room that had been locked. The news struck us like an electric shock, leaving us speechless. Miss Morstan, already too familiar with mystery and loss, maintained astonishing composure, though her eyes revealed her suffering. Thaddeus continued, clearly distressed, his voice thick with fear and horror. Bartholomew had found the Agra treasure, the object that had obsessed the Sholto family for years, and on that fateful night he was killed by a poisoned dart, fired from a small blowpipe. At once this conjured a terrifying image, the one-legged man and the Andaman accomplice Holmes had mentioned earlier. The locked room, barred from the inside, with no sign of forced entry, only deepened the eerie mystery. This was not simply a story about death, it was about the continuation of a curse, a spiral of violence and greed clinging to the Agra treasure. Here the narrative expands beyond a single case into a story about the nature of evil, about how money, especially money gained dishonorably, can destroy lives, not only those directly involved but generations to come. After revealing Bartholomew's death, Thaddeus Sholto, his voice dramatic, blending personal fear with a burning desire to cleanse his conscience, began to recount the history of the Agra treasure. This was the story we had been waiting for, a tale hidden for years, a tale of betrayal, greed, and their horrifying consequences. He began with his father, Major Sholto, a British officer in India during the violent Sepoy Rebellion of 1857, one of the most chaotic and brutal periods in the history of British India, when moral principles were often eclipsed by the pursuit of power, wealth, and survival. In that turbulent setting, an opportunity arose at Agra Fort, one of the greatest symbols of Indian power and wealth. Within its fortified walls lay an immense treasure, one Thaddeus described with a mixture of fear and awe, as though it were a living thing, powerful and cursed. It was a hoard of diamonds, pearls, glittering gemstones, and pure gold, accumulated over centuries by Indian Raja, symbols of the limitless wealth of a fallen empire. Major Sholto, along with a close friend Captain Morstan, Miss Morstan's father, and two other men, Jonathan Small and another accomplice, had been assigned to guard this treasure. At first, their task was to protect it from looters and keep it safe. But the temptation of such vast wealth became too great. Thaddeus told how greed began to eat away at these men's souls, slowly transforming them from honorable soldiers into traitors. One night, Sholto and Morstan secretly fled with the treasure, leaving their two companions stranded in misery, exposed to the wrath of both the British and the Indians. It was a ruthless act of betrayal, an indelible stain that haunted them to their dying days. This betrayal was not merely a past event, it was a profound lesson about the nature of greed and human corruption. The Agra treasure, though promising endless wealth, brought no happiness. Instead, it became a curse, a heavy burden that bred fear, division, and misery. Major Sholto lived tormented by guilt and relentless fear. He knew Jonathan Small and his accomplice would never forgive the betrayal, and that one day they would come to reclaim what was theirs or to take revenge. That fear hardened into obsession, a demon gnawing at his mind. He became paranoid and isolated, living in constant vigilance. He feared every strange sound and every shadow, and above all he was haunted by the image of the one-legged man, which appeared again and again in his nightmares and delirious ravings. This psychological punishment is a powerful warning about the consequences of wrongdoing. Wealth, especially wealth gained through greed and betrayal, rarely brings peace. More often it becomes a burden, a curse passed from one generation to the next. We see similar examples in history. The Koh-i-Noor diamond, a magnificent gem with a blood-stained history of violence and power struggles, or artifacts stolen from ancient civilizations that many believe carry a curse for their possessors. Such stories are not merely legends, they reflect a deeper truth of human psychology. We often project our emotions, fear, guilt, shame onto lifeless objects, transforming them into symbols of what we have done or what has happened to us. On his deathbed, before his final breath, Major Sholto made a brief confession to his son, Thaddeus. Spoken in panic and terror, it revealed the truth about the Agra treasure and his involvement in it. He also disclosed a map or cipher leading to the treasure, something Bartholomew later discovered and deciphered, enabling him to find the treasure inside Pondicherry Lodge. And it was precisely this discovery that cost Bartholomew his life. Thaddeus, though weak and fearful, carried a strong sense of justice. He felt responsible for sharing the treasure with Miss Morstan, the rightful heir of Captain Morstan. He believed that sharing it was the only way to atone for his father's wrongdoing and bring some measure of fairness to her. This suggests that even in the darkest circumstances, there can still be sparks of goodness and morality. Thaddeus Sholto's story is not only about a lost treasure and a mysterious murder, it is also a deep study of the psychological effects of guarded secrets, limitless greed, and the weight of guilt. Thaddeus's hypochondria can be seen as a symptom of chronic stress and inherited guilt. His fear of death is not merely fear of illness, it is the outward sign of deeper anxiety about the consequences of his father's actions. Like an untreated infected wound, the secret of the treasure and the betrayal ate away at the Sholto family, bringing mental and physical collapse. People who live with great secrets, especially morally troubling ones, often suffer high stress, anxiety, and depression. This is not uncommon. In real life we see individuals struggling under the burden of family secrets, past mistakes, or traumatic events they dare not reveal, and such burdens often lead to long-term mental and physical health problems. Major Sholto, with his obsession and paranoia, is a striking example of the destructive power of a great secret. Fear of revenge made him a lonely man, imprisoned by his own mind. Isolation, fear, and guilt corroded him from within until peace became impossible. The lesson is clear: secrets, especially dark secrets, rarely remain harmless. They tend to grow and spread, affecting not only the keeper but those around them, even generations later. Miss Morstan, amid all of this, shows remarkable resilience. Though she has suffered greatly from the actions of her father and Major Sholto, she preserves her composure and dignity. She does not let emotion overwhelm reason, but remains focused on truth and justice. The contrast between Thaddeus's trembling sensitivity and Miss Morstan's steadiness is one of the story's most intriguing aspects, showing different ways people respond to shock and trauma. Meanwhile, Sherlock Holmes, as an objective observer, maintains emotional distance. He concentrates on gathering facts, analyzing evidence, and constructing hypotheses logically, without allowing personal feelings to interfere. This is one of Holmes's most defining traits, the ability to see clearly, unclouded by bias or emotion. Dr. Watson, on the other hand, with his compassion and deep empathy, is the human link in the story. He is not only the recorder of events, he experiences them, feeling the pain and fear of those around him, and through him we, the listeners, better understand the human impact of what is unfolding. The combination of Holmes's sharp reason and Watson's humane heart creates a perfect balance, enriching the story and giving it depth. This chapter opens a world of mystery and morally complex questions. It forces us to reflect on the nature of wealth, the true value of material riches, and the way our choices, even those made long ago, can shape the present and future. Pause for a moment to consider: have you ever wondered whether historical objects, priceless antiques tied to stories of violence and betrayal, truly carry a curse? Or is that merely a reflection of human fear and guilt projected onto them? If you suddenly inherited vast wealth, yet knew its origins were murky, its history dark, what would you do? Would you seek to cleanse your conscience, as Thaddeus Sholto tries to do, or would you keep the secret and live under its weight? Do secrets, once hidden, ever truly disappear, or do they continue shaping our lives, our families, and even future generations, as the Agra treasure haunted the Sholtos and the Morstans? These questions have no easy answers. We will continue exploring them as the story unfolds. By the end of this chapter, we have been introduced in depth to Thaddeus Sholto, a complex character, a mixture of fear, weakness, and a powerful sense of justice. We have witnessed the beginning of a new tragedy, the death of Bartholomew, and, most importantly, we have heard the painful history of the Agra treasure. Chapter 5: The Tragedy of Pondicherry Lodge. The night air, thick with a chill that seemed to seep into our very bones, pressed against us as we journeyed towards Pondicherry Lodge. The fog, a clammy shroud, swirled around the handsome, distorting the familiar London landmarks into spectral forms before giving way to the oppressive silence of the suburban outskirts. Each turn of the wheel seemed to grind louder, each breath we took seemed to carry a heavier weight of anticipation. Miss Morstan sat opposite us, her face a pale, determined oval in the dim light provided by the occasional passing gas lamp, her silence a testament to the profound anxiety gripping her. Her delicate frame, usually so composed, now seemed almost brittle, poised on the edge of a precipice. Watson, ever the observant companion, noted the tension in the air, a palpable dread that seemed to deepen with every clatter of the horses' hooves on the cobbled lane, echoing the rapid beat of his own heart. Even Sherlock Holmes, typically an embodiment of serene intellect, exhibited a subtle, almost imperceptible restlessness, a slight tightening of his jaw, a deeper furrow in his brow. He was a man anticipating a complex problem, one that promised not merely intellectual stimulation but potentially grave implications, a problem whose tendrils might stretch far beyond the walls of the city. We had journeyed for what felt like an age, passing through dimly lit streets that grew progressively darker and more deserted. The gas lamps became fewer, their sickly yellow glow doing little to penetrate the encroaching gloom, their circles of light shrinking almost defiantly in the face of the overwhelming darkness. The coachman, guided by Holmes's precise directions, navigated the labyrinthine lanes with an uncanny intuition, the carriage wheels splashing through unseen puddles, the entire journey feeling increasingly like a descent into some unknown realm. Finally, with a jolt, we turned down a long, winding driveway overshadowed by ancient, gnarled trees. Their branches, skeletal against the moonless sky, seemed to claw at the air, their shadowy forms dancing eerily in the fog, adding to the pervasive sense of foreboding that now felt almost suffocating. "This must be it," Holmes murmured, his voice cutting through the silence of our anticipation like a sharp blade. His tone, usually so crisp, held a deeper resonance now, hinting at the gravity of the unfolding situation. Pondicherry Lodge loomed before us, a dark, sprawling edifice nestled amidst overgrown gardens. It was a house that exuded an air of neglect, of secrets kept and forgotten, of a past that refused to lie dormant, clinging to its very stones. Not a single light gleamed from its multitude of windows. It stood like a blind, silent sentinel, its heavy oak door a gaping maw in the darkness, seemingly awaiting our arrival with a malevolent patience. The profound silence that enveloped it was unnerving, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl, a mournful, solitary sound, and the nervous snorting of our horse, whose breath plumed visibly in the cold air. The sense of an unseen presence, a heavy curtain of expectation, hung palpably in the cold night, a warning unspoken yet deeply felt. Horse stops, gentle jingle of harness, then silence. Holmes sprang out, his agile form barely touching the ground before he was striding towards the front door, Watson and Miss Morstan close behind. The air grew colder, the fog denser here, clinging to the damp flagstones, swirling around our ankles like restless spirits. The house felt entirely deserted, a tomb rather than a dwelling, its once grand facade now crumbling slightly at the edges, hinting at decay. Holmes rapped sharply on the heavy oak door with the brass knocker. The sound echoed hollowly through the night, a brief, violent disruption that seemed to reverberate through the very foundations of the house, before fading into an even deeper, more oppressive silence. He waited, his head cocked, listening intently, his sharp eyes scanning the unlit windows, searching for any flicker of movement, any sign of. Chapter 6 Sherlock Holmes gives a demonstration. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Sign of the Four, Chapter 6. Sherlock Holmes gives a demonstration. After the horrifying events at the home of Thaddeus Sholto, where we witnessed the gruesome discovery of Bartholomew Sholto's death, the atmosphere is heavy with fear and terror. The room is silent, broken only by the stifled sobs of Miss Mary Morstan and the panic audible in Thaddeus's breathing. Yet amid that chaos, a tall, composed figure steps onto the scene, bringing with him a strange calmness. It is Sherlock Holmes, and with his arrival, the focus of the story shifts from tragedy to a cold, scientific pursuit of the truth. When we arrived at Thaddeus Sholto's house, the air was already thick with tension and dread. The scene inside the room was a frightening chaos. Bartholomew Sholto lay motionless on the bed, a grotesque smile frozen on his face, and an unusual poisoned dart, tipped with venom, was embedded in his skin. The police were summoned, and Inspector Athelney Jones of Scotland Yard soon appeared, bringing with him his familiar air of self-satisfaction. Jones, a man of imposing appearance but limited sharpness of mind, immediately leapt to conclusions. To him, Thaddeus Sholto was the obvious murderer. His lazy logic instantly painted a picture of a dispute over inheritance, a quarrel between brothers that had turned violent. Sherlock Holmes, however, was not a man easily persuaded by what seemed obvious. To him, the obvious was often merely a veil concealing a far more complex truth. As Jones grumbled about his hasty conclusions, Holmes stood silently, his keen eyes sweeping over every corner of the room, registering the smallest details. His meticulous attention to his surroundings was a reminder that the world, to a trained mind, is a treasure trove of evidence waiting to be deciphered. To Holmes, every speck of dust, every stain, every footprint was a piece of a larger puzzle. He was not dazzled by grand theories. Instead, he focused on the tiniest fragments of reality. He quickly bent down and drew out his familiar magnifying glass, a tool that, in his hands, became a third eye, revealing a world invisible to the naked eye. The light from our lantern reflected off the glass, illuminating minute details on the carpet and floor that Jones had completely overlooked. Holmes began to examine the footprints closely. He was not merely looking, he was analyzing, comparing, and reasoning. He discovered two distinct kinds of footprints. One set was small and delicate, almost imperceptible, suggesting the foot size of a child or a very small adult. The other was larger, with a strange, asymmetrical indentation at the heel, hinting at a physical defect or an artificial aid. The discovery did not end with size alone. Holmes noticed something else, a dark, slightly glossy residue clinging to some of the footprints. He bent down to smell it and immediately recognized the distinctive odor of creosote, wood preservative commonly used in industry, especially in shipyards or construction sites. It was a small detail, but to Holmes it opened a door to an entirely new realm of deduction. Creosote is not something one easily finds in an ordinary, well-appointed home. Its presence suggested that the criminals were no ordinary murderers. They had some connection to an industrial environment, perhaps a river or a dockyard. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, if you were a detective, seeing these clues, the small footprints, the unusual heel mark, and the unmistakable smell of creosote, what would you deduce? At first glance, these clues may seem disconnected, but in fact they tell a story. They begin to paint a portrait of the criminals. Do you see the connection? When placed side by side, these fragments start to form a clearer picture. Holmes explained his reasoning to us. "Gentlemen," he said calmly, without the slightest arrogance, "we have two individuals involved in this crime. One is very small in stature, perhaps a child or a dwarf, likely an agile climber. The other is a tall, strongly built man, and what is remarkable is that he has a wooden leg. Watson and Inspector Jones as well stared at Holmes in disbelief. A wooden leg? It sounded far-fetched, almost novelistic. But Holmes was unconcerned. He continued, explaining that the unusual heel impression was irrefutable evidence of a wooden prosthetic leg. And the smell of creosote? It suggests that this man comes from somewhere connected with docks or construction sites, where creosote is widely used, he said. As for the smaller tracks, I believe they belong to a native, someone from a different culture, perhaps a dwarf. The contrast between Holmes's method and that of Athelney Jones could not have been clearer. Jones, red-faced and loud, stubbornly insisted that Thaddeus Sholto was the murderer. He relied on circumstantial evidence and what he believed to be an obvious motive: money. He even ignored the physical evidence Holmes had so carefully gathered. To Jones, forensic science was a waste of time, a frivolous game. He trusted his instincts, his hasty judgments, and the application of familiar patterns to complex situations. Holmes, by contrast, represented an entirely different approach, one grounded in observation, analysis, and scientific reasoning. He did not merely look, he saw. He did not merely hear, he listened. He did not merely think, he reasoned systematically. He transformed the smallest scraps of evidence into the building blocks of truth. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the essence of forensic science, a field in which Holmes was a pioneer long before it became widely recognized. Today we have modern forensic laboratories, DNA analysis, digital fingerprints, and countless advanced tools. Yet the fundamental principles remain the same: meticulousness, attention to detail, and the ability to reason from the smallest pieces of evidence to construct a larger picture. Holmes did not simply collect evidence, he explained, step by step, how he reached his conclusions. He pointed out how the small footprints in the ashes of the fireplace showed that the smaller criminal had climbed up and down the chimney to enter and leave the room. He explained that the poisoned dart used to kill Bartholomew was a native weapon, not something an ordinary English murderer would use. All these details, when woven together, began to tell a story of criminals from a different world, using different methods, driven by motives far more complex than anything Jones could imagine. While Jones argued with Thaddeus Sholto and prepared to arrest him, Holmes quietly continued his investigation. He needed neither noise nor approval, only the truth, which was to be found in physical evidence. Holmes's devotion to the truth, wherever it might lead, is what makes him a great detective. He is not governed by prejudice, nor blinded by emotion. He examines evidence with an open mind, ready to follow wherever it leads. One of the most important lessons of this chapter is the value of careful observation and scientific reasoning. In life, we are often too quick to draw conclusions, too easily misled by first impressions. We see an event and immediately assign it a cause without examining all the evidence. But as Holmes demonstrates, the smallest details, those seemingly insignificant fragments, often hold the key to unlocking the truth. Consider how often we overlook small details in conversation. A slight gesture, a change in tone, a fleeting glance, all can be vital clues to what someone is truly thinking or feeling. Yet we are often too focused on spoken words to notice these subtler signals. Holmes teaches us to become better observers, not only in solving crimes, but in all aspects of life. The discovery of creosote is a perfect illustration. Who among us would stop to smell a stain on the floor and deduce its industrial origin? Most would dismiss it as just another mark. But to Holmes, it was a gateway to a wealth of information. It was not merely a smell, it was a trace, a sign of where the criminal came from and what he might have done. This is the power of deductive thinking, the ability to connect seemingly unrelated dots into a coherent picture. Holmes is not just a detective, he is a scientist. He applies the scientific method to crime solving, forming hypotheses based on evidence, testing them, and discarding those that do not fit. This stands in stark contrast to Jones, who reaches a conclusion first and then searches for evidence to support it, a fundamental logical error. This chapter also raises the issue of prejudice. Jones is constrained by traditional notions of crime and motive. He cannot see beyond the familiar story of greed and rivalry. Holmes, on the other hand, is entirely free of prejudice. He is willing to accept a murderer who is a dwarf wielding poison darts and a man with a wooden leg, because the evidence leads him there. This is an important lesson for us all, to keep an open mind and not allow preconceived notions or assumptions to obscure our view of the truth. By the end of the chapter, Holmes has a clear idea of the criminals, or at least part of them. He deduces that they likely escaped by boat, since the traces of creosote suggest a connection to water. He instructs Watson to prepare for a journey by river, setting the stage for an exciting chase to come. Jones, meanwhile, remains trapped in his false assumptions, smugly believing he has caught the culprit. In this chapter, we witness a true demonstration of intellect and scientific reasoning. Sherlock Holmes does not merely solve a crime, he teaches us how to see the world. He shows us that every small detail has value, that truth often hides in the most unexpected places, and that a trained, unbiased mind is the most powerful tool we possess. The key concepts to take from this chapter are forensic science, deduction, trace evidence, observation, the scientific method, and prejudice. Remember, as Holmes has shown, the key to unlocking life's most complex mysteries often lies in our ability to look beyond the surface, to seek out the small details others overlook, and to connect them through logic and reason. Our adventure with Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson has only just begun. What they discovered in Bartholomew Sholto's house has laid the groundwork for a thrilling and dangerous pursuit. Stay tuned for the next chapter, as we continue the journey with Holmes and Watson into the mysteries behind the Sign of the Four. Thank you for listening, and see you again in the next chapter. Chapter 7, The Episode of the Barrel. Welcome back, dear listeners, to our continued journey through the labyrinthine streets of Victorian London, as we delve deeper into the intricate mysteries of the Sign of the Four. In our previous chapter, we left off with a crucial discovery, a tantalizing thread in the complex tapestry woven by crime, the pervasive, unmistakable scent of creosote clinging to the floorboards of the Aurora, the very smell that led young Miss Morstan and Dr. Watson to experience a momentary but telling wave of nausea. It's a scent that, for Sherlock Holmes, is not merely an unpleasant aroma, but a beacon, a signpost guiding him through the fog of uncertainty. And now, armed with this olfactory clue, Holmes knows exactly what the next step must be. "Watson," Holmes declared, his eyes alight with a renewed intellectual fire, "our pursuit takes on a new dimension. Human intellect, keen as it may be, has its limitations. The human nose, even one as discerning as mine, cannot compete with the specialized instruments nature has bestowed upon certain of our four-legged companions. We need a dog, Watson, and not just any dog. We need Toby." The mere mention of Toby brought a faint, almost imperceptible smile to Holmes's lips. It was a rare glimpse into the softer side of the great detective, a man whose stern logical facade often concealed deeper currents of affection and, dare I say, fondness. Toby was no ordinary canine. He was, as Holmes described him with a note of distinct pride, a curious mixed breed, an unusual blend of a half-spaniel and a half-lurcher. Imagine, if you will, a creature of whimsical proportions, long, soft, floppy spaniel ears framing a surprisingly intelligent, almost mischievous lurcher snout. His body, somewhat ungainly perhaps, possessed an undeniable energy, a coiled spring of enthusiasm barely contained. Toby was not known for his beauty in the classical sense, nor for his dignified bearing. Indeed, he was rather ugly, with a short, yellow, and unkempt coat that seemed perpetually ruffled, giving him the appearance of having just rolled out of a particularly energetic tussle. But beneath that rather comical exterior lay a genius, a maestro of scent, whose nasal passages were an unparalleled instrument for tracking the faintest of trails. He belongs to an old fellow named Mr. Sherman, a bird stuffer by trade, who lives in Pinchin Lane, near Lambeth, Holmes explained, already pulling on his coat. Toby is a singular creature, Watson. His scenting powers are extraordinary, quite beyond anything I have encountered. He is not the swiftest of runners, mind you, and his appearance might not inspire awe, but when it comes to following a trail, especially one as distinct as creosote, he is utterly peerless. His devotion, too, is absolute, once he has accepted you. And so, with a shared glance of anticipation, we set off. The journey to Pinchin Lane was a microcosm of London itself, a vibrant, bustling tapestry of life unfolding before our eyes. We hailed a hansom cab, its wheels rattling over the cobbled streets, the clip-clop of the horses' hooves providing a rhythmic soundtrack to our urgent mission. The air, though far from pristine, carried the myriad smells of the sprawling metropolis, the rich aroma of baking bread wafting from a corner bakery, the sharp tang of coal smoke from countless chimneys, the damp earthiness from the Thames, and the ever-present, indefinable scent of humanity itself, a complex bouquet of sweat, perfume, poverty, and ambition. This city, dear listeners, was not just a backdrop, it was a living, breathing character, its narrow alleys and grand thoroughfares holding secrets and pathways in equal measure. Upon arriving at Mr. Sherman's humble abode, a quaint, slightly disheveled building tucked away in a quiet corner of Lambeth, we were greeted by the eccentric bird stuffer himself, a man as peculiar in appearance as his prized dog. And then, there was Toby. He burst forth, a bundle of yellow fur and boundless energy, initially greeting us with a symphony of barks and an enthusiastic tie. Chapter 8: The Baker Street Irregulars. "And now, Watson," Holmes declared, his eyes gleaming with a peculiar satisfaction that suggested a puzzle finally falling into its rightful place, "the time has come to deploy my unique auxiliary force. A force, I assure you, utterly unmatched by Scotland Yard or any official agency for sheer ubiquity and speed of observation across this vast, sprawling metropolis. I remember my initial confusion, Watson, at the sight of these young lads, these street urchins who seemed to materialize from the very cobblestones of London itself. They were a motley crew, indeed, full of boisterous energy and an uncanny street wisdom that belied their tender years. The air in Baker Street, usually so quiet and filled only with the murmur of our discussions or the scratch of Holmes's pen, suddenly vibrated with a raw, untamed excitement. Their arrival was less a procession and more a controlled explosion of youthful exuberance, each boy a bundle of nervous energy, their eyes darting about, eager for instruction, eager for the chase. Their leader, a sharp-featured lad named Wiggins, stood a little apart, his ragged cap held respectfully in his hand, a thin, wiry frame that seemed to absorb and reflect the grit of the city. He possessed an intelligence that, had it been nurtured by different circumstances, might have seen him in far grander halls than the alleyways he called his domain. But here, in Holmes's service, Wiggins was a king in his own right, commanding a small army of quick eyes and nimble feet. He was the quintessential urban scout, his senses honed by necessity, his intuition a product of constant, unfiltered exposure to the teeming life of London. He was, in essence, a living, breathing network of immediate, ground-level intelligence, far more effective than any static map or official report could ever hope to be. Holmes, with that characteristic blend of authority and understated charm that allowed him to navigate every strata of society, from the highest echelons of government to the lowest rungs of the urban underclass, addressed them with a gravity that they clearly understood and respected. He spoke not down to them, but as a general to his trusted lieutenants, outlining the vital importance of their mission. "A steam launch, boys," he explained, his voice low but penetrating, the Aurora. Fast, 50 feet long, with a black funnel and 2 masts. It may be disguised, painted over, but the hull shape, the engine, these things are harder to change. It must have been seen. Someone, somewhere, knows where it is harbored, where it fueled, where it went next. It was a profound testament to Holmes's unique genius that he understood the immense power held by these seemingly insignificant individuals. They were the eyes and ears of London that no official force could ever truly access. They blended seamlessly into the background, unnoticed, unheard, moving through the intricate labyrinth of back alleys, docks, and riverside wharves where a uniformed officer would immediately stand out. They possessed an inherent knowledge of the city's hidden pulse, its secret languages, its unwritten rules. Holmes saw not just street urchins, but untapped reservoirs of observation, loyal, intelligent, and fiercely dedicated to the man who treated them with respect and offered them purpose, and, of course, a shilling for their pains. His ability to command such disparate forces was truly one of his most remarkable attributes. While Scotland Yard relied on rigid protocols and hierarchical structures, Holmes built his intelligence operations on personal connection, astute psychological insight, and an understanding of human motivation that transcended social barriers. He could dine with dukes one evening, discussing matters of state, and the very next morning, he would be bartering information and eliciting crucial details from the city's roughest characters, all without missing a beat, without compromising his integrity, and always with an unparalleled clarity of purpose. This fluid adaptability, this rejection of conventional boundaries, was precise. Chapter 9, A Break in the Chain. Chapter 9, A Break in the Chain. The return to Baker Street felt less like an arrival and more like a descent into a protracted state of suspended animation. The exhilarating pursuit, which had thrummed through our very veins with the urgency of a drum beat, had abruptly ceased, replaced by a vacuum of anticipation. The raw, biting chill of the London night still clung to our coats, an unwelcome souvenir of the river's damp embrace, and the residual adrenaline, so recently a powerful surge, now receded, leaving behind an echoing hollowness, a profound and heavy weariness that settled deep within our bones. Holmes, ever the embodiment of restless intellect, began to pace the familiar confines of our sitting room, his movements sharp, almost agitated. His iconic hawk-like features, which I had so often seen alight with the brilliant fires of deduction, now seemed curiously dulled, etched with a peculiar disquiet, a shadow that hinted at the deeper, often darker, currents beneath the surface of his remarkable mind. He was a man accustomed to action, to the relentless intellectual grind, and this sudden, enforced idleness was a torment to his restless spirit. Sound design, gentle, consistent patter of rain against the window pane, a subtle, melancholic backdrop, growing gradually more noticeable. I watched him, a silent observer of his internal struggle, before my gaze drifted instinctively towards the window. There, the rain, a soft and persistent drizzle at first, had begun its steady, rhythmic drumming against the pane, a monotonous cadence that seemed to magnify the oppressive quiet of the room. Each drop, tracing fleeting paths down the glass, appeared to echo the slow, inexorable ticking passage of time, stretching the minutes into an eternity of waiting. The aurora, our elusive quarry, was out there, somewhere on the vast, swirling, murky canvas of the Thames, a phantom ship laden with untold secrets and, potentially, the definitive key to Miss Morstan's future. We had, for the moment, exhausted every avenue of immediate action. The meticulously woven net had been cast, its invisible threads extending into the unknown. Now, all that remained was the agonizing test of patience, to simply wait for it to ensnare our quarry. This period of enforced inactivity, I knew from long and intimate experience, was often the hardest, the most profoundly challenging, for Holmes. His mind, an intricate and finely tuned engine of logic and deduction, demanded constant fuel, an unceasing supply of complex problems to unravel, of mysteries to dissect. Without it, he risked overheating, metaphorically speaking, or, more perilously, succumbing to the profound intellectual stagnation that he so deeply abhorred, a state that often manifested in his more destructive tendencies. My own thoughts, however, had, by then, embarked upon a different, more labyrinthine journey, diverting from the thrilling intricacies of the case to a far more personal, and perhaps, more existentially profound quandary. It was the image of Miss Mary Morstan that consumed me, her quiet fortitude, her eyes that held both the shadow of sorrow and the glint of an unyielding spirit. Her presence had, in a remarkably short span, woven itself irrevocably into the very fabric of my being, altering the landscape of my solitary existence in ways I had never anticipated, and indeed, had never dared to dream. I found myself, with a disconcerting frequency, replaying her words, recalling the precise angle of her head, the faint blush that sometimes colored her cheeks, the gentle cadence of her voice. Each memory was a sweet, sharp ache, a testament to the burgeoning affection that now resided, unbidden yet welcome, within my heart. Yet, this profound, burgeoning emotion was not without its own accompanying shadow. Miss Morstan, if the treasure of Agra were truly recovered, stood to become an heiress of considerable means. And I was, to put it plainly, a medical man of respectable standing, certainly, with a university degree and some honorable experience serving Her Majesty. Chapter 10, The End of the Islander. Welcome to the Sign of the Four, and this is Chapter 10, The End of the Islander. As we continue our dramatic tale, tension hangs over everything, a sense of urgency running through every moment. We have joined Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, and Inspector Athelney Jones aboard the police patrol boat on the River Thames, a powerful, rough-built vessel designed for speed and efficiency in policing London's intricate waterways. The steam engine pounds with a heavy, relentless rhythm through the night, each burst of vapor a promise of an unceasing pursuit. The Thames, so often described as the Empire's lifeblood, has tonight become a blazing arena, a dark escape route for fugitives and a perilous hunting ground for those who seek justice. The river is no longer picturesque, it feels like a living force, surging with secrets and dangers lurking beneath its inky surface. Picture the scene. The city lights glitter like spying eyes along both banks, sometimes obscured by looming warehouses and tightly packed moored ships, forming a hazy maze of light and shadow. Our vessel, like the river's Black Maria, gathers speed and slices across the water, white spray flinging outward like outstretched arms. We are hunting the Aurora, a small but agile steam launch carrying Jonathan Small and his mysterious companion, Tonga, along with the Agra treasure, a legacy of greed and violence. Holmes's hunter's instinct is fully awakened. His eyes burn in the darkness as they scan every wave and every bend of the river. He says little, but his concentration speaks volumes, an intense fire of will blazing behind his sharp gaze. Watson, as always, feels a blend of fear and excitement, a sensation both terrifying and exhilarating as he takes part in this dangerous chase. Inspector Jones, with his blustering manner and slightly excessive confidence, shows a determination that is, at least, admirable. All of us are drawn into the whirlpool of pursuit, racing against time and fate. Will we catch them? Or will that precious treasure vanish forever into the night, along with those who stole it? Listen to the sounds around us, the water slamming against the hull, the wind whistling past our ears, and above it all, the constant roar of the steam engine driving us at full speed. Black smoke billows from the funnel, sketching fleeting strokes across the night sky. There is a powerful fascination in joining such a high-speed chase, something perhaps only those who have lived it can fully understand. It is like a game of cat and mouse, but with real consequences, lives at risk, and a fateful treasure at stake. Detective Holmes points forward, his voice low but weighty as it cuts through the engine's noise. There it is, gentlemen. Look, the red light at the stern. The Aurora. A surge of excitement runs through us. After so long following clues and complex deductions, we are finally confronting the fugitives directly. The patrol boat, under the command of a seasoned pilot, begins to accelerate with astonishing force. Its bow drives forward powerfully, throwing up waves that slap hard against the banks. The pilot, a taciturn man with a weathered face, handles the vessel with skill, as if he knows every bend and current of this dark river. His mastery on the Thames is living proof of the experience earned by those who work upon its historic waters. Only a mile now. Holmes's voice rings out again, now filled with excitement, almost exhilaration. He seems invigorated by the very danger of the chase. For him, this is not merely a case, it is a great match, a test of intellect and speed. Stoke her up. Jones commands, his voice eager. We must catch them. The stoker, a broad-shouldered man with a face smeared with coal dust, nods rapidly and immediately shovels more coal into the furnace. The flames flare violently, casting a red glow over his sweat-slick face. The patrol boat responds at once. The speed leaps. The engine's pounding grows even louder and fiercer, like a beast growling as it hunts. The distance between us and the Aurora shrinks noticeably. We can see the other vessel more clearly, smaller, but swift and nimble, gliding like a fish over the water. Then we make out faces on its deck. Jonathan Small, gray hair falling over a face twisted with desperation and frantic effort, and his terrifying companion, Tonga, an islander, small in stature but radiating strength, his eyes wide and wild, his expression savage and menacing. How far can desperation drive a person? In moments like this, we witness humanity's most primal nature, raw survival instinct, and the willingness to do anything to escape punishment. Small is not a clever man, but he possesses hardness and an unbreakable will, forged through years in colonial military service and harsh experience. He has lived his whole life waiting for the Agra treasure, and now it is slipping from his grasp. The aurora begins weaving dangerously, trying to cut across and dart around other boats on the river to slow us down. Reckless, risky tactics. But our pilot is no novice. He maneuvers the patrol boat expertly, reacting instantly to every swerve of the aurora, never hesitating. We stay close, the patrol boats whistle shrieking to warn other vessels to clear the way. As we draw nearer, a horrifying sight meets our eyes. Tonga, the islander, stands at the prow of the aurora, a long blowpipe raised to his lips, his eyes burning with hatred and fury. "Look out!" Holmes shouts, his voice edged with terrifying urgency. He may have poisoned darts. A chill runs down Watson's spine. It is Tonga, a true monster, the embodiment of primitive brutality, the one responsible for Bartholomew Sholto's dreadful death. His poisoned darts are silent, efficient weapons, capable of ending a life within minutes. In such situations, the difference between life and death can be a fraction of a second, a moment of quickness or delay. And then it happens. A small dart, like a malicious wasp, shoots straight toward us. It grazes Watson's ear and thuds into the boat's wood with a soft thump. The cold metallic brush against the skin is still vivid, a chilling reminder of death's closeness. Holmes reacts instantly, decisive and cold as ever. He draws his pistol from his coat pocket and aims with precision, without hesitation. "Shoot him, Holmes," Watson cries, though the words are unnecessary. A gunshot cracks across the river. In an instant, Tonga, the dangerous, mysterious islander, falls into the water. He sinks without a cry, without a sound, like a heavy stone. A strange silence settles over us for a moment, and then the patrol boat surges on through the waves. Tonga is dead, yet the danger is not entirely gone. His death is a harsh reminder of the world's brutality, where justice sometimes demands sacrifice and decisive action. Was it a release, or simply another tragedy in a chain of tragedies? With Tonga gone, Jonathan Small is utterly alone. He has only himself left to face his fate. At last, The patrol boat catches the Aurora. Our hull slams into its side with a loud crash, sending water spraying upward. Our sailors and police officers immediately leap onto the Aurora's deck, pistols in hand, faces set with determination. Small, now with no escape, stands as an image of desperation and helplessness. He struggles weakly, throwing punches and kicks without strength, but he is quickly subdued and handcuffed. Inspector Jones, wearing a smug expression, solemnly produces his handcuffs and locks them firmly around Small's wrists. "Jonathan Small, you are arrested for murder and robbery," Jones declares, his voice triumphant. But the search for the treasure matters most. Where is the treasure? Holmes demands, his voice urgent as his eyes sweep the deck. Where is the Agra treasure? Small bursts into laughter, a dry, bitter sound. It's at the bottom of the river, gentlemen. It sank down with Tonga. A wave of disappointment washes over us. The entire Agra treasure, the source of so much suffering and so many deaths, has vanished forever beneath the black waters of the Thames. The heavy chest of jewels and gold had been thrown overboard by Small in the final moments of the chase, a desperate act, preferring destruction to letting it fall into another's hands. A heavy silence settles. The thrill of pursuit fades, replaced by a strange emptiness. The treasure, the center of every scheme and every crime, is gone. The chase is over, the criminals have been captured or killed, yet the cost remains. We wonder, is there always a price for justice, sometimes far greater than we can imagine? Consider the complexity of this situation. The high-speed chase on the Thames is not merely an exciting action sequence, it is evidence of a collision between the old world and the new. The steam launch, a product of the Industrial Revolution, is used to pursue criminals carrying a story from distant lands, a blood-stained tale of greed and betrayal. Modern technology serves to resolve a mystery rooted in a deep colonial past. And Tonga? His death is a tragic emphasis. He is a native outsider in London, swept into a plot that was not truly his own. He is a living weapon, used by Small, and his death raises moral questions about the use of lethal force in such circumstances. Was there any alternative when faced with a direct threat like poisoned darts? Holmes, with his cold logic, does not hesitate to act. But for Watson, a doctor, a healer, the act carries a different moral weight. After Small is brought aboard the patrol boat, we begin the journey back. The engine's sound softens, no longer an angry roar but a deep, steady murmur. London, with its arched bridges and dim yellow lights, seems to welcome us back from a strange adventure. Holmes, though the treasure has not been recovered, appears oddly satisfied. For him, solving the mystery, bringing criminals into the light, matters far more than reclaiming jewels. "You see, Watson," he says thoughtfully, "life is often less romantic than we imagine. Evil is frequently simple and brutal, but finding it requires subtlety. For Miss Mary Morstan, however, the disappearance of the Agra treasure means something different. It means she will not become a wealthy woman." Yet, as Watson realizes, this may be a blessing in disguise. Sudden wealth often brings burdens and troubles of its own. Miss Morstan's purity and honesty seem preserved by the loss of that blood-stained treasure. What can we learn from this pursuit and its dramatic conclusion? First, the importance of preparation. Holmes is always one step ahead, anticipating the enemy's moves. Second, persistence. Despite obstacles including Inspector Jones's skepticism, Holmes never abandons his goal. Third, the necessity of decisive action in danger. When faced with direct threat, hesitation can be fatal. And finally, let us reflect on the concept of justice. Does justice always mean lawful punishment and the recovery of property? Or does it also include restoring order, revealing truth, and sometimes the loss of what was unjustly taken? The Agra treasure has sunk, taking its curses and painful stories with it. Perhaps that is the most fitting fate for it. Place yourself on that patrol boat that night. Have you ever felt adrenaline surge when facing a great challenge, a race against time where every decision can mean the difference between success and failure? It is a feeling both frightening and powerful, shaping who we are and testing our limits. In the real world, high-speed pursuits on land or water always carry serious danger. They demand perfect coordination between people and machines, lightning-fast decisions under immense pressure. And the consequences, for both pursued and pursuers, can be severe. This story reminds us that even in the early days of technology, the fundamental principles of pursuit and escape did not change: speed, skill, and an unbreakable will. With Small imprisoned and the treasure sunk, the Agra mystery is finally resolved, though not with the happy ending many might have hoped for. It is a reminder of the complexity of crime, the variety of human motives, and sometimes the futility of greed. And so this chapter ends with a sense of completion, yet also of emptiness. We have witnessed the breathless chase, the confrontation, and death of Tonga, the capture of Jonathan Small, and the permanent disappearance of the treasure. The key words to remember from this chapter are pursuit, Thames, speed, desperation, poison, justice, loss, and consequences. These are the elements that shape the plot and offer profound lessons about human nature and society. Thank you for listening, and we will continue exploring the next chapters of The Sign of the Four. Chapter 11, The Great Agra Treasure. Welcome, dear listeners, to Chapter 11 of The Sign of the Four, a pivotal moment in our adventure where the weight of anticipation reaches its peak, only to dissolve into a revelation that is as profound as it is unexpected. We left our intrepid quartet, the brilliant Sherlock Holmes, the steadfast Dr. Watson, the hopeful Miss Mary Morstan, and the ever-present Inspector Jones, at the brink of discovering the fabled Agra treasure. They stand in the gloom of a disused boathouse, the sinister Tonga having just met his end, and before them lies the small, iron-bound chest, the very object around which a labyrinth of intrigue, betrayal, and murder has been woven for decades. Imagine the scene with me. The air is thick with the chill of the river, the faint metallic tang of the chained launch, and the lingering scent of gunpowder. Moonlight, fractured by the grimy windows, casts long, dancing shadows that seem to stretch and contract with every breath. All eyes are fixed on that chest, a repository not just of gold and jewels, but of untold suffering, of secrets whispered in the dark, and of lives utterly ruined by its pursuit. Each person present carries their own burden of expectation. For Miss Morstan, it represents a restoration of her inheritance, a chance to reclaim a lost legacy. For Holmes, it's the ultimate validation of his deductive prowess, the successful culmination of a complex case. For Jones, it's the tangible proof of his efforts, a clear victory in the eyes of the law. And for Watson, it's a moment of truth regarding his burgeoning affections for Miss Morstan, a test of whether his love is truly selfless, or if it falters in the shadow of potential wealth. Holmes, with a characteristic calm that belied the monumental nature of the moment, stepped forward. His movements were precise, almost ritualistic, as he took the small, rusty key, a key that had traveled across continents, passed through murderous hands, and held the power to unlock decades of mystery. He inserts it into the corroded lock. The tension in the small boathouse was palpable, a dense, humming silence broken only by the lapping of the river against the old timbers and the faint creak of the launch. We collectively held our breath, our imaginations already conjuring visions of glittering diamonds, shimmering emeralds, and stacks of ancient gold coins, each piece whispering tales of colonial India and the daring deeds of the Sign of the Four. With a deliberate turn, accompanied by a grating, protesting groan from the rusty mechanism, the lock finally yielded. The sound was surprisingly loud in the stillness, a punctuation mark for the climax of our long journey. Holmes then slowly, almost ceremoniously, lifted the heavy lid. The hinges, equally stiff with age and disuse, shrieked in protest, a sound like a tortured ghost. All leaned forward, their faces illuminated by a flickering lantern, reflecting a mixture of hope, trepidation, and raw curiosity. This was it. The moment of truth. But what greeted their eager, straining eyes was not the expected riot of precious stones, nor the gleam of yellow gold. No. The chest, the infamous Agra treasure chest, was utterly, unequivocally empty. An anticlimax. A complete and utter emptiness. A stunned silence descended upon them, even deeper and more profound than the suspense that preceded it. It was as if the very air had been sucked out of the confined space. The shock was universal, a shared moment of disbelief. Mary Morstan, who had braced herself for the possibility of immense wealth, stared into the hollow interior with a vacant expression, her earlier anxieties and hopes suddenly rendered meaningless. Inspector Jones, whose mind had no doubt already drafted the official report detailing the recovery of a fortune, let out a grunt of pure frustration and bewilderment. Even Holmes, usually so unperturbed, showed a fleeting flicker of something akin to surprise in his keen gray eyes, though he quickly regained his composure. And Watson, dear Watson, felt an entirely different surge of. Chapter 12, The Strange Story of Jonathan Small. Sound of a creaking ship, waves lapping, distant gulls. The air is thick with anticipation. Now then, the gruff voice began, devoid of all pleasantry, yet holding an undeniable, captivating power. You want my story, do you? All right, you shall have it. But understand one thing from the outset, I regret nothing. Not a single damned thing. You call me a villain, a murderer, society's label, I suppose. But I followed my own code, a code forged in the crucible of hell itself, and it's a code that, in my estimation, is far more honest than many you'd find amongst your so-called respectable folk. He shifted, the clank of chains a grim punctuation mark. My name is Jonathan Small, and my tale begins, as many a tragic tale does, in a place far from these grey shores, under the scorching sun of India. I was a young man then, a private in the 3rd Buffs, stationed in the upper provinces. A simple soldier, minding his own business, until destiny, or perhaps the devil, decided to intervene. The year was 1857. You know what that means, don't you? The Great Mutiny. An uprising, a rebellion, a bloodbath. Call it what you will, it swept through the land like wildfire, consuming all in its path. It was a time of unimaginable chaos, of brutality that would make your blood run cold, where trust was a luxury no man could afford. Friend turned on friend, neighbor on neighbor, and the very ground seemed to reek of betrayal and fear. The air vibrated with the screams of the dying, the roar of cannon, and the desperate cries of those who knew their end was near. It was not a war of lines and colors, but of desperate, personal survival, where every shadow held a potential enemy, every whispered word a possible death sentence. We were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and often, out of hope. The days blurred into weeks, each one a testament to sheer, unyielding endurance, and the nights were haunted by specters of what we had seen and what might yet come. I was a sentry, guarding an outlying post near the fort of Agra. A lonely, isolated spot, vulnerable. It was there that I encountered them, 2 Sikh troopers, hardy, formidable men, Dust Akbar and Abdullah Khan. And with them, a third, a Muslim from Rohilkhand, Muhammad Singh. These weren't enemies, not exactly. They were, like me, caught in the inferno, but driven by their own motives. They spoke of a treasure, a legendary hoard of jewels belonging to a Raja, which was being secretly moved from the fort. A vast fortune, enough to set any man up for life, to escape the misery and the bloodshed. It was a temptation no sane man could resist in those desperate times. Greed, yes, but also the primal urge for security, for a future beyond the daily dance with death. The mutiny had stripped us of everything: our homes, our camaraderie, our very humanity, it sometimes felt. And here was a chance, a glimmer, to reclaim something. We formed a pact, the four of us. A blood oath, sworn on the edge of a tulwar. We would ambush the convoy, seize the treasure, and share it equally. No matter what, we swore, we would stand by each other. It was a desperate gambit, born of desperation and the savage opportunism that thrived amidst the carnage. We saw ourselves not as criminals, but as men seizing an opportunity presented by the chaos. The world was upside down, and we were simply adapting, playing by the new, brutal rules. This wasn't about allegiance to a flag or a crown, it was about survival, about carving out a future for ourselves where none seemed to exist. We were, in essence, pirates on land, navigating a sea of blood and fire. The stakes were life and death, and the reward, if we succeeded, was freedom from the endless grind of poverty and conflict. The ambush itself was simple enough, ruthless and efficient. We struck at night, a swift, brutal affair. No quarter given, none expected. We secured the treasure, the fabled Agra jewels. A king's ransom, glittering in the torchlight, mocking the blood-soaked earth around us. But then, as fate would have it, just as we were about to divide our spoil. 7-day action plan, the detective mindset. Welcome, discerning listeners, to a pivotal chapter in our journey through the analytical world inspired by Arthur Conan Doyle's The Sign of the Four. Today, we embark on a transformative adventure, a practical immersion into the very heart of the detective mindset, encapsulated in our 7-day action plan. This isn't merely about appreciating the genius of Sherlock Holmes, it's about actively cultivating those extraordinary faculties of deduction, observation, and detached analysis within your own life. We're going to bridge the gap between Victorian London's foggy streets and the complexities of your modern existence, applying Holmesian principles to real-world challenges, from understanding social cues to dissecting personal dilemmas. Prepare to sharpen your senses, refine your intellect, and see the world with a newfound clarity, for the game, as they say, is afoot. Our first 2 days, Day 1 and Day 2, are dedicated to the foundational cornerstone of all great detective work, active observation. Holmes himself often reminded Watson that while many see, few truly observe. This isn't just about glancing, it's about seeing with intent, with purpose, training your brain to register details that normally fade into the background. For these 2 days, your primary mission is to practice active observation of strangers in everyday settings. This could be a coffee shop, a bus stop, a park bench, or even a bustling street corner. Let's be precise about this exercise. It's not about judgment or idle curiosity, it's about collecting data points. Focus on an individual and consider their clothing. What does their attire tell you about their profession, their likely income bracket, their attention to detail, or even their personal preferences? Are their shoes worn but polished, suggesting practicality and care, or scuffed and neglected, hinting at haste or indifference? Observe the fabric and style. A crisp, well-tailored suit implies a certain professional environment, perhaps corporate or legal, while faded denim and a band t-shirt might point to a more creative or casual lifestyle. Is their watch a cheap digital model or a classic heirloom? Do they wear jewelry, and if so, what kind? A simple wedding band, a statement piece, or multiple eclectic bracelets? Each item is a piece of a larger puzzle. Beyond clothing, delve into their demeanor. How do they carry themselves? Is their posture erect and confident, or slouched and hesitant? Watch their gait. A hurried, purposeful stride suggests a busy schedule, perhaps a looming deadline, while a meandering pace might indicate leisure or contemplation. Pay attention to their facial expressions and micro-expressions, those fleeting twitches of emotion that often betray deeper feelings. Are their eyes darting nervously, or are they calmly taking in their surroundings? A tense jawline or furrowed brow could signal stress or deep thought, while a relaxed expression might suggest contentment or a lack of immediate concerns. Observe their interactions, if any. How do they speak to a barista or a fellow passenger? Is their tone polite and measured, or abrupt and dismissive? These nuances, often overlooked, are rich veins of information about a person's personality, their current mood, and their social habits. Consider the objects they carry. A well-worn book might indicate a studious nature, while a shiny new smartphone, constantly checked, could speak to a preoccupation with digital connection or a demanding job. Do they carry a heavy briefcase, a light shoulder bag, or nothing at all? The contents and condition of these items, though unseen, can be inferred. The goal here is not to form definitive conclusions, but to generate hypotheses, to practice linking observations to potential inferences, just as Holmes would. For instance, a person with mud-splattered but expensive hiking boots, a rugged backpack, and sun-kissed skin might lead you to hypothesize they just returned from an outdoor adventure. It's about building a mental profile from fragmented data. After your observation session. Summary: Top 3 takeaways. Welcome, dear listeners, to the concluding chapter of our journey through Arthur Conan Doyle's captivating mystery, The Sign of the Four. As we draw this intricate tale to a close, it's time to distill the essence of its profound narrative into 3 core takeaways, lessons that resonate far beyond the fog-shrouded streets of London and the exotic confines of India. These aren't just plot points, they are timeless reflections on human nature, logic, and the very fabric of justice and loyalty. Our aim here is to synthesize the major themes of the book, providing you with a deeper understanding of its enduring impact. So, let us begin our final exploration, much like Holmes sifting through clues, to uncover the true meaning behind the adventure. Our first takeaway, perhaps the most stark and pervasive theme running through The Sign of the Four, is the inherent danger of greed. From the moment the fabled Agra treasure enters the narrative, it acts as a magnet for misfortune, a cursed object that brings nothing but death and misery to everyone it touches. Think back to the initial discovery, a glittering hoard of jewels and precious metals that promised untold riches. Instead, it became the catalyst for betrayal among companions, leading to the murder of Achmet, one of the original 4 signatories to the pact. This single act of covetousness by Jonathan Small, driven by a desire to keep the entire fortune for himself and his associates, set in motion a chain of tragic events that spanned decades and continents. Consider the fate of Captain Arthur Morstan, Mary's father. He met his untimely end not through malice directly aimed at him, but as a consequence of the greed that compelled him to confront Major Sholto over the missing treasure. His death, a heart attack brought on by shock and anger during the dispute, underscores how even a passive involvement with ill-gotten gains can be fatal. Then there is Major John Sholto himself. Haunted by the treasure, living in perpetual fear and paranoia, he isolated himself, squandered a portion of the fortune, and ultimately suffered a fatal heart attack upon seeing the face of Jonathan Small, years after their original crime. His life, far from being enriched, was consumed by guilt and terror. Even his own son, Bartholomew Sholto, who finally unearthed a portion of the treasure, could not escape its dark shadow. He was murdered by Tonga, Small's Andamanese accomplice, in a desperate attempt to reclaim the jewels, turning his discovery into his demise. The Agra treasure, in its purest form, was a symbol of immense wealth, yet it became a symbol of human frailty and moral decay. It corrupted friendships, led to a cycle of vengeance, and left a trail of broken lives in its wake. This isn't just a fictional device, it mirrors countless historical accounts where the discovery of valuable resources, be it gold, diamonds, or oil, has fueled conflicts, exploitation, and profound human suffering. From colonial powers plundering vast continents for their riches to modern-day resource wars, the narrative of greed leading to destruction is a recurring one. Psychologically, it's a powerful exploration of how the human desire for more, when unchecked by ethics or empathy, can override all other considerations, turning individuals into something monstrous, distorting their perception of right and wrong, and ultimately, ensuring their own undoing. It makes us ask, what is the true cost of material wealth if it comes at the expense of one's peace, one's conscience, or one's very life? The treasure, in the end, was not a blessing but a curse, systematically dismantling the lives of all who sought to possess it. Moving on, our second critical takeaway from the Sign of the Four is the unparalleled value of logic, and how emotional detachment is sometimes absolutely necessary to perceive the truth. At the heart of this lesson is, naturally, Sherlock Holmes himself. He embodies the scientific method applied to crime solving, a mind utterly dedicated to fact, observation, and rigorous deduction. Outro and CTA, join the irregulars. And so, with the final turn of the page, or rather, the last lingering note of our narrative, we bring to a close the intricate and compelling tale of the Sign of the Four. From the quiet desperation of Mary Morstan to the shadowed complexities of Jonathan Small's past, and through the labyrinthine corridors of London's underworld, we've journeyed alongside the inimitable Sherlock Holmes and his steadfast companion, Dr. John Watson. It's a story that has thrilled, intrigued, and, perhaps most importantly, challenged our own powers of observation and deduction. Now, as the echoes of the Andaman Islands and the grim realities of greed and misplaced justice fade, I have a burning question for you, our discerning listener. as Holmes pieced together the fragments, connecting the dots of a scattered inheritance, a missing father, and a vengeful spirit, did you, for a single moment, find yourself ahead of the great detective? Were there clues, subtle hints, a turn of phrase, or an overlooked detail that illuminated the path for you before Holmes, with his astonishing intellect, laid bare the solution? Did the mystery unravel in your mind with the same swift, elegant logic that characterized Holmes's brilliant deductions? We want to hear your thoughts, your hypotheses, your moments of insight. So, please, if you're listening to this on a platform that allows comments, share your experience below. Tell us if you cracked the case before Baker Street's finest, or if you were as delightfully confounded and then enlightened as Dr. Watson himself. It's a friendly challenge, a testament to the power of a well-crafted mystery, and we eagerly await your confessions of amateur sleuthing triumphs, or indeed, your appreciative acknowledgments of Holmes's unparalleled genius. This journey through the Sign of the Four is just one chapter in a much larger narrative, a narrative woven from the very fabric of adventure, intellect, and timeless human drama. If you found yourself captivated by the gaslit streets, the intricate plots, and the sheer intellectual thrill of a good mystery, then I invite you to become a vital part of our growing community. Consider this your official invitation to join the digital Baker Street Irregulars. Just as Holmes relied on his network of street urchins to gather intelligence and extend his reach into the unseen corners of the city, we too are building a community of dedicated enthusiasts, keen observers, and lovers of literature who crave more. By subscribing to our channel, you're not just hitting a button, you're donning your deer stalker, grabbing your magnifying glass, and officially enrolling in an elite cadre of fellow adventurers. What does it mean to be a digital Baker Street Irregular? It means you'll be the first to know about our upcoming audiobook releases, allowing you to seamlessly continue your literary explorations. It means you'll gain access to exclusive content, behind-the-scenes insights into the production of these audio experiences, and perhaps even some unique challenges designed to test your own deductive reasoning. It's a place where discussions can flourish, where theories can be debated, and where the enduring legacy of figures like Holmes and Watson can be celebrated and explored in greater depth. We believe that stories, particularly stories as rich and complex as these, are meant to be shared, discussed, and re-examined. Becoming an irregular means being part of that ongoing conversation, a participant in the grand intellectual game that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle so masterfully created. It's a chance to deepen your appreciation for the craft of storytelling and the enduring power of classic literature. Think about the psychological impact of a well-told mystery. Why are we so drawn to them? Is it the innate human desire to impose order on chaos? Is it the primal satisfaction of seeing justice served, even in fiction? Or is it the sheer intellectual workout, the mental gymnastics required to keep pace with a genius like Holmes? The sign of the four masterfully plays on these. Thank you for listening to this audiobook. If you found value, meaning, or inspiration in this journey, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next chapter. Your support helps us bring more timeless classics to life. See you in the next reading.